What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Classic Octane. I am Taylor. First things first, today I'm filming on my big camera. My goal is to kind of up my audio video quality. Whenever I film with this camera, I inevitably mess up something with autofocus or something like that, so I ask you to please be patient while I figure it out. I promise the end result in the long run will be worth it. Today we're back on the R100GS. I was actually going to kind of transition to some other projects on it while I waited for the piston rings to come in, but the company I ordered them from was super fast and they're already here. So we're just going to keep going with this. My goal for the end of the day today is to get it all the way back buttoned up and actually fire it up and make sure everything's good to go. Where I left off last time was we had just discovered that a portion of our oil control ring was broken. I had a lot of questions in the comments about, well, where's the rest of the ring? It's all still in here. The rest of the ring is all complete. Everything is completely fine. It's literally just this outside section that broke off. Very luckily, it did not mess up our piston skirt or the ring lands, anything like that. There was also absolutely no evidence of the break on the cylinder wall itself. Sometimes when piston rings have issues, they can kind of gouge up the sides of these walls. This is 100% exactly like you would expect it, so we're very, very lucky. I went ahead and ordered a complete OEM set, so it's going to include all three rings. We're going to go ahead and replace all three of them. What I need to do first is pull them off. You can do this by hand. I have a set of piston ring pliers that just make it a little bit easier to do so. If you bend one of these rings a little bit too far one way or the other, they will shatter. I have a video on that very subject. But this is designed to kind of evenly expand the ring out so that you don't run into any of those problems. Once I get these out, we actually need to measure our new rings and make sure that our end gaps are all exactly within spec. So I'll walk you guys through that process. So what I'm going to do now is measure that piston ring end gap is what it's called. I'm going to start with our first compression ring. This one's going to be at the very top. Generally these do have a top and bottom. There's a little stamping right there that says top, so we know that that's going to be going towards the outside of the cylinder, away from the block. What we do is just kind of gently get this into the bore. We're just looking to get it started all the way around, just kind of like that. We take our piston with no rings installed, flip upside down, and what we're looking to do is press this down and get it nice and square in the bore. And what I can do to confirm that is I am actually using the ring land for the very bottom ring. So I'm using this line right here to make that completely flat with the top portion of the cylinder. That way I know that this piston ring is square in the bore. Now that I know it's square in the bore, I don't know if you can see on this side right over here, there's a small gap where the end of that piston ring is matching up. There's actually a specification in the book for how big that gap is supposed to be. There's a kind of a minimum and a maximum clearance. For this particular bike, we're looking at between, let's see, I got the book over here, 0.4 millimeters on the small side, 0.65 millimeters on the big side. So we want it to fall in between that. So I got my feeler gauges here. I'm just going to go straight to 0.65. We want to make sure it's not bigger than that. 0.65 does not fit in there. So that's good. We'll go down to 0.4. 0.4 millimeters. Plenty of space. So we know now that that spacing is between those two, which means it's in spec. I'm going to go a step further and actually just figure out exactly what it is, just out of curiosity. So we'll try a couple random ones. Did I just nail it? Looks like 0.58. Let's look at 0.6. No, wow, I nailed it. 0.58 millimeters is what our gap is, which is exactly between spec. So we can nice and easily kind of evenly pull this out. Exact same spec on the number 2 compression ring. And then our oil control ring, we want a little bit tighter of a gap on there. We're going to be looking for 0.25 to 0.4. So I'll double check all three of these and then we'll get them installed. Confirmed all of our ring gaps are within spec. Not super surprising with a quality, stock size replacement. It's generally when you get into the real custom stuff is when you have to start to adjust those end gaps. If you're building an engine for like forced induction or something like that, you'll probably go with a little bit wider end gap to compensate for the added pressure in the cylinders from boost. That can kind of expand those rings, and if they're too tight, you can actually break off ring lands and all kinds of crazy stuff. But this is just a stock engine, so we don't have to worry about that on this particular build. So what I'm going to do now is just take my piston ring pliers, start to get our rings in place. This little spring part in the oil control ring is a little bit, shall we call it, fiddly. I'm going to see if I can put it on beforehand and then sneak the piston ring over top of it. And again, this is one of those take your time things. No need to rush it, no need to bend anything or twist anything too much. Once you get them in place, they should move freely. Move up to number 2, keeping in mind that the top is the top of the piston. Get it in the groove nicely. We are going to want to clock these gaps as well. And what I mean by that is you want these gaps to be about 120 degrees apart from each other. So, you picture like one over here, one over there, and one down here. We just don't want them all to line up. That's an opportunity for compression to kind of sneak by. Piston's installed. I'm leaving it sticking out so that obviously we can put our wrist pin and everything back in. Before I do that, I need to replace 3 O-rings. So there's a big gray one on the bottom of this cylinder. This guy right here. This is our replacement. And then there are the 2 small ones that go over our top studs. Make sure this goes in the thing. We've got 2 small ones up here. Then we need our pushrod tube seals. Here's the new one, here's the old one. Reinstall it just how it came. Same orientation. Just like that. We're ready to slide this thing home. Some people will criticize me for putting this in dry. I've always installed my piston rings dry and I have never once had a problem. So there's tens of thousands of miles on engines that I've installed that way. So, you do it however you like, but that's how I do mine. Now we just need to get this connecting rod, piston, and wrist pin and everything all lined up. Pull our cardboard out, grab our circlip. Once that's all installed, we're ready to make sure our 2 little O-rings are in the proper grooves, which they are. Start to send this thing home. I'm not going to bore you guys with the rest of this install since it's exactly what I just showed in the last video on the left side of the bike. So I can get this completely buttoned up and I'll bring you guys back when that part's done. We're ready to move on to the rest of the reassembly. Now that I got the engine back together, I'm going ahead and pulling apart these carburetors because I'm gonna soak them in the ultrasonic cleaner. Also, probably gonna vapor blast them. Might as well, if you have the machine. So we should get these things cleaned up quite nicely. The condition of them is not terrible, if you remember from the very first video, but we didn't actually clean them all that well the first time. We were just basically trying to get the jets cleaned out enough to get it to run. Now we're trying to do a little bit more official rebuild. I'm going to replace these vacuum diaphragms and then all of the O-rings and then the 2 gaskets. There's one for the bowl and there's another one that's for, I believe, the choke on the side. The rest is just a couple of O-rings. Everything else is going to stay the same, so I need to make sure it's super clean. The little jets and all that stuff are prone to getting clogged up with today's fuels. So I'm going to get this thing torn apart. We'll throw them in the ultrasonic cleaner, probably run it for, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes to get some of this gunk off the side. I'll bring you guys back when I'm pulling them out so you can see what they look like. Then we'll throw them in the vapor blaster and take them to the next level. Soup's all ready. Let's see how stuff looks. I keep a little jug of water right next to me here so I can kind of rinse everything off. Also cool it off. It's very hot coming out of there. Throw everything on my tray. Floats look pretty good. Parts for these Bing carburetors are not as easy to come by as they are for the like older Honda stuff, the old like key-in carbs, which you can buy, you know, most parts for those pretty easily. Rebuild kits come with all new jets, all new springs and everything. The rebuild kits literally just came with those gaskets and O-rings. That was it. Unless you wanted to spend a couple $100 on another rebuild kit that came with more stuff, but I guess that's just the BMW tax everybody talks about. So a lot of this gunk will kind of stay on here, but the main point is so that we loosen it all up so that when I hit it in the vapor blaster, it'll all just shoot right off. Getting the carbs reinstalled. I'm also going to go ahead and take this time. I fully replaced all of the fuel lines as well, just because we're here. They're old and petrified, so it'd be silly not to take a couple of minutes to do that. I imagine there's some sort of syncing process with these carbs. I'm gonna have to look that up. See how you adjust them, how you get them synced on both sides so that one cylinder is not, you know, running ahead of the other one. It's the next morning and we are ready to cold start this thing. See how it goes. A little bit nervous. All our fuel lines, fuel filters, all that stuff is in place. Nothing seems to be leaking. Well, except for my oil pressure switch is still leaking. I didn't order one before because I wasn't sure if that was just residual oil coming off our fork tube seals, our pushrod tube seals. It is still leaking, so I did go ahead and put that on the list to order. Let me turn the fuel on the other side. A second. I think a lot of that's just carb tuning and the fact that I think our carbs are way out of sync. Because I've done absolutely nothing to make sure that they're at all synchronized. I'd like to fire it up and see if I can get it to just kind of run for like a minute or two. Just to double check everything, make sure our rings get kind of seated nicely, make sure there's no kind of catastrophic issues. I think if there was, they would have already been apparent. But just for peace of mind, I'm going to try and see if I can get it running just a little bit longer. Good enough for me. You can tell our oil's leaking straight on the exhaust pipe over there by our plumes of smoke. So I'm going to mark this down as a big success. I do still have quite a bit of work to do. Obviously the bike doesn't run great, but it does run, which is, you know, an accomplishment after taking an engine apart, especially one you've never worked on before. I do need to familiarize myself with the carb tuning on this bike. I think they're way out of sync. I think the mixer screws are in the wrong spot. The choke is also not synchronized. One is like much higher than the other when you move the lever, and those are all adjustable. There's quite a few things to tweak and get right to get the bike to run the way it should. So that's going to be the big next step to get this thing back on the road. I also still have a laundry list of other maintenance items, tires and tubes. Need to go through and check all the oils and fluids and that kind of stuff. We still have a front brake to address. We got a lot more content coming on this bike very soon. So I appreciate you guys watching this one as always. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments, anything like that, please drop them in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.